Welcome, everybody. This is Now That's Debatable. I'm your host, Fantastic Assad, and I'm joined with my co-host, Geocentric Skeptic. Geo, are you with me?
I am. Good morning. Evening, everybody.
Welcome. How's it going?
I'm chilling, bro. Just excited to get started, man.
Yeah, man. Got another interesting one for sure this week.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you guys hadn't checked it out, we're doing the war on drugs. So it's going to be something not necessarily completely out of left field from what we usually do, but just another one of those ones that can kind of reach out and impact a lot of people that we may know. Geo, did you have anything you wanted to say before we took off?
Oh, yeah. Our discussion groups page. It's grown a lot over the week. I noticed for the past few weeks it's been lagging behind the main podcast page by about 80 or so likes, and now it's only about 20 or so behind. So, yeah, man. Hey, guys, thanks for liking and following, and uh, hope you share and invite your friends. And
Yeah, absolutely. We
page
definitely
is
want you guys to call in. We want you to chat, ask questions, give feedback, comment, whatever makes you happy. We want to let your voice be heard as well as ours.
yep.
And of course, that number scrolling up on the screen, 202-888-5350. And of course, you can say hello in chat. As you've seen and as hopefully you've been a part of, any chat that goes up, we will try to do our best to respond to it in a timely fashion. And kind of take it on, whether it's a comment, a question, etc. We want to kind of address it accordingly. And we do appreciate our feedback and our comments and whatnot. So let's keep it up and keep it going.
My bad. I was briefly distracted by my toddler.
No worries. I heard some noise in the background there, but I think we're going to be okay. Did you
Yeah.
have somewhere particular you wanted to start? Let's go ahead and get this kicked off.
Let's start with let's talk about I guess the prohibition, because this is not America's first time, crossing swords with drugs.
Uh,
In the early 20th century, it was alcohol.
yeah,
With the onset of I think it was the 18th Amendment, and I think it's the 21st Amendment that outlawed it. I mean that eradicated the 18th Amendment, which
yeah,
pretty
which
much
was the prohibition of
legalized
alcohol.
alcohol.
Yeah. So comment right off the bat. Thank you, Jared. It says the war on drugs is an absolute failure. Definitely going to get into
Definitely.
that as far as its effectiveness. I don't think either of us would disagree. Um, but when we get to the effectiveness side of it, I think we'll put out some stats and some information that may demonstrate just how much of a failure the war on drugs has been.
Yeah.
As far as prohibition, obviously it didn't work with alcohol. We basically, there was obviously the idea of rum runners and the whole. I'm not a huge fan of it, and apologize if you are. It's not to be taken offensively, but the whole concept of NASCAR actually came out of running alcohol
Yeah.
down in the South in North Carolina, actually, which is uh, where NASCAR got its origins, and it was literally the illegal transportation of alcohol, specifically rum, but as well as things like moonshine and just beer, because it was just illegal to possess alcohol. And it led to people not only just using and consuming and distributing alcohol on their own terms and kind of under the cover of night, but it also led to things like gross alcohol abuse and hush
What it
money.
also led to is growth of the mafia.
Yeah, that's what I was
We
gonna say. Like,
saw during that time we saw an unprecedented level of violence from organized crime, and that's because of the black market that was literally created by the government. And that's one thing. Like as a libertarian, when I'm arguing with non-libertarians, this is one of the objections that I always hear is, they bring up the black market, and the it's in reality. I don't know, throat scratchy, but yeah, in reality, the black markets is and always will be the creation of governments. When the government outlaws something that people want to do, they're going to do it anyway, and they're going to have a black market for that thing. Just like right now, what we see with drugs, what you saw in the early 20th century with alcohol, and when you create that black market and you prevent people who deal with um, that product that's been forced into the black market, they no longer have a legal recourse. Something goes wrong, they can't sue you, they can't take you to court because their business is totally illegitimate. So when there is some sort of dispute between two providers of that illegal product, how do they resolve it? Usually through violence.
Yeah,
And
it's
that's when things get bad.
who has the most
Because
money or who has the
innocent
most
people wind
power.
up getting, hurt and, the crossfire.
Yeah, the old who has the most money or who has the most power, and sometimes one or the other is both.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what you were saying from like a lot of these organized crime families up in New York and Boston and what we were seeing in Chicago. The reason they were able to do what they did is because of the government. And it was also the most dangerous time to be a cop. Actually, there were more cops killed per capita and during the Prohibition than any other time in history.
Yeah,
It
and
was a
as a matter of fact,
total failure.
the
Yeah.
the idea and the concept of the war on drugs in general, and even referring to the more modern one that started in the late 70s, early 80s, but
Hmm.
it's basically increased the number of cop deaths strictly from the war on drug portion um, by about 30%, because it's just
Wow.
a dangerous thing. Because
Hmm.
I mean, you have people doing things illegally, like making their own meth labs, or making their own heroin or that kind of thing, and then when you have your own meth lab and cops bust in the door thinking that you're abusing your girlfriend or whatever, and they find a meth lab, things go south really, really quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little different when cops are there knocking on your door trying to see if you've seen the neighbor's cat, and they find you know drug paraphernalia strung out everywhere, or you working with some extremely hazardous chemicals trying to do stuff in your basement because you don't have anywhere else to do it. But on top of that, obviously, drug uses and drug users can, not always, but can be of a violent nature, and or very protective about their supply and demand. Just kind of the way it works if that's your whole livelihood.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, like it has to be that way, right? I mean, when you're dealing with the black market, you have no peaceful recourse if something goes wrong.
Yeah, so I mean,
So
it's not only like how these people are making their money, it's how they're living their lives. Because if that goes away, they don't have income, they don't have output, they don't have, I mean, there's just so many tie ins with things when you make this substance or any substance completely illegal instead of, trying to do something like regulate and or mildly restrict. And I mean, I think the most obvious case, at least in the United States, of where that just failed over and over and over again and is finally becoming a legalized substance is marijuana. And it's just like, compared to like things like that are already legal, like alcohol, the use and distribution of marijuana, at least as far as the states that has become legalized in, the only thing that's really happened is that less people are going to jail for possession of marijuana. You're not seeing an increased rate in crime. You're not seeing an increased rate in
I know.
like it's just not happening. I don't know what the
I,
concern was, but that ain't it.
I often say the most dangerous part of using marijuana is getting caught by the police using marijuana.
Yeah,
A drug isn't going to hurt you.
Yeah,
It's when the
probably
police
not an
catch you and then ruin your
exaggeration.
life. By
Yeah,
giving you a criminal record.
yeah, you get a criminal record, you
So,
can't get jobs, you can't get into like federal jobs at all. You have a criminal history, and then you may
mhm.
end up turning back to drugs because life's not going so great and you can't get a regular job.
Yeah.
So it just kind of perpetuates the cycle and doesn't really solve anything, especially for things like mild possession of marijuana, where it's an arbitrary line on for cops in certain states whether you have intent to distribute. So
Yeah.
quite an
You- you-
interesting scenario.
I think when you get to the root of the problem of why the drug war is just so ineffective, it's because it's something that the government shouldn't be doing it in the first place. You know, the government, at least I mean, as a libertarian speaking, government is meant to protect, you know, you from other people. But it's not meant to protect you from yourself. Not meant to protect you from your own bad decisions. Like don't get me wrong, like using drugs is stupid, right? You shouldn't start using cocaine or whatever like that, right? But if you want to, like, it's your body. So this is really where the government is just going wrong. And
Yeah.
they have, the people that's pushing this. I was gonna say they have good intentions. Some of them do. Um,
Yeah, I mean, to the extent of they don't want people on drugs, I'll say that some of those people have that as an intent for the war on drugs, or at least their part in the war on drugs.
so
But
you know
that's
what
not the whole
lobby?
case.
I tell you, you know what lobby is very active in fighting the legalization of drugs, especially marijuana.
I mean, I don't know if it's a lobby in and of itself, but I bet you it's the U.S. prison system.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
exactly what
yeah,
I
it
was gonna
wouldn't
say.
surprise me at all.
Yep, U.S. prison system because 'cause they get certain amount of money from the government per prisoner.
Yeah, you,
So
you
you
want me to
start
give you
legalizing
a
drugs,
really
there's
quick
gonna be
fun
fewer
fact since we
prisoners.
decided to bring it up real quick? $9.2 million a day to incarcerate people just on drug-related charges.
Wow.
$9.2 million a day. That is what
Mm.
our prison system charges to currently house, and that was as of 2015. That number may have changed
Oh,
since
it's
then.
probably much higher than
Yeah,
that now.
it's
I'd
probably
imagine.
higher than that now, but just a heads up.
Yeah.
As of 2015, that number was $9.2 million a day to incarcerate people with drug charges.
Yeah. Yeah. So they want to. So they're opposed to legalizing drugs, not because they think it's gonna be harmful to you, but we can't lock you up for it and get money.
Yeah, and I mean, like, just to further speak on the overall ineffectiveness of the war on drugs, another quick stat for you. In 2009, about 25% of all drug charges in the United States were dismissed by prosecution because, quote, they didn't have time.
Jeez, man.
So, I mean, like, the war on drugs is incredibly effective at getting people arrested. It's not so great at getting people incarcerated, and there's obvious lobbying from like prisons, which are often privately owned and federally funded, and then they're making a hand over fist of money to keep these people in prison for minor to mild to non-offenses. So, for instances, in places where drugs are, like, for instance, marijuana possession is now legal, there hasn't been prison reform for those people. So,
Hmm.
quick Google search: nearly half, 46% of people incarcerated in state prisons in 2015 were convicted of nonviolent drug, property, or public order crimes. Thank you, Jared. That is a fun statistic. That's half, almost, of all the people incarcerated in state prisons. Nonviolent drug, property, or public order crimes. And
Yep.
guess who's making bank on that?
Yeah. In prison systems.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, that's ridiculous, man.
Yeah.
As you know, um, the first thing that you had is geography. I wanted to get into that because like the drug war, it's not just fought in the United States. Other countries have their own drug wars. I don't know if you're familiar with the Philippines. Their president was just the absolute tyrant. He sends his thugs slash police officers, whatever you want to call them, who run into some of these drug houses, and they literally murder people, and just shoot up everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's ridiculous. But we're for geography, the United States is, because of its location, is in uh pretty it's an uphill battle. We last week, we were talking about guns, and I was talking about how a country like the UK or Australia, it's much easier for them to ban guns or ban anything, and then not only ban it but effectively remove it from society. Like I think I've read in the UK they had how many shootings was there in the UK? One year, I think it was just like 4 shootings. And here in the United States, we'll have several dozen per day. So because the UK is an island, it's much easier for the government to control what gets in and what's out. The to bring this back to drugs, for the United States doesn't have that advantage. They share a border with 2 large countries. Canada isn't as problematic, but our neighbor to the south is, and that's the problem. When you have jurisdictions that are either incapable or unwilling to enforce similar drug laws as ours, it becomes an uphill battle because we have to be able to stop those drugs from crossing over the border. And that's not something that we figured out how to do.
Yeah,
And matter of
and
fact, I can't even think of an effective way to do it. You could talk about like, I mean, Trump talked about putting a wall up. We could do a whole podcast on why that's a stupid idea. But the your drugs from this, I saw one statistic from Border Patrol, and they were talking about how about 95% of the drugs come through the points of entry. So let's say hypothetically there was this massive Rio Grande, right? That which separates Texas from Mexico, right? Now you want people to be able to travel back and forth, right, from the United States to Mexico, right? So you have, checkpoints, right? So you have holes in the wall for checkpoints for people to get through. The drugs are coming through the checkpoints. So they're loading up on trucks, go through Border Patrol, get checked, but they fail to catch it, and then they get through.
yeah, I
So
mean, like
they're literally coming in through the front door. So
yeah,
building a wall or something like that, there's or any sort of physical barrier isn't going to be able to solve this.
yeah, I mean, like
Because
it's the same problem that we have with like immigration control. Is that
yeah,
most of the time, as far as immigration, it's people that just overstay their visa. They come in legally, and then nothing happens if they don't leave.
yeah,
Same thing with drugs is that they're coming here legally to the extent of they're going through the proper procedures to get into the country, but then they just get distributed, and that's what happens with
yeah.
drugs.
And they're hiding them in unique places. Like I've seen, they're hiding them in watermelons, in furniture. They put them in tires. Like it's crazy, and they have like different ways they can mask it so dogs can't find it, etc. So
Yeah, they've also
and
done really, really clever things like tossing stuff over the fence or
yeah,
digging a hole
that's
under it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, like there's so many ways to do it, and so like just considering the fact that right now we don't have a way to effectively prevent illegal contraband from coming over the border, this drug war it's an uphill battle, and the vast majority of those drugs are coming from a southern border, and not even like not even always Mexico. You know, from Colombia as well, but they're coming from the south. You know,
Yeah.
what through through Latin America. So that's why our geography makes fighting a drug war just doomed for failure.
And I,
We don't
and
have we don't have the benefit of 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 sitting on an island like the UK or like Australia. I'm sorry, you about to say something?
I just wanted to address something that may be brought up or may come to people's minds, and that's what about other countries that aren't islands that have drug issues or that have really good drug regulation and control? And just for funsies, because I enjoy stats and I enjoy numbers and I like to inform people on things that they may not know sometimes. Uh, I would wager. I'll make you guess just because, and it's not that they're you under the bus because I doubt anyone would know this off the top of their head. Do you know how many countries in the world there are that have the death penalty for drug offenses? Off the top of your head?
I don't. I know the Philippines are executing people. I'm not sure if that's on the books.
Yeah, there's
I just
33
the
countries
Philippines
in total.
really okay.
And the number one outside of China, because China tends to cover up their drug use and problem. Outside of China, people that are a little more open with their drug use and execution is Iran. In which they've executed nearly 1,200 people since 2015 for drug use and drug possession. So, since we're on the topic of geography, the top five for executions are China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, and Singapore. And although the drug problem is a problem and the war on drugs is incredibly ineffective, I think, my 2 cents here, the death penalty for drug possession and or distribution is a little, pardon the pun, overkill.
Well, yeah, especially if the reason why you implemented that law in the first place is because you think the drugs are dangerous, it's going to kill people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, that's
in
kind
that
of...
sense, yeah, it's far more dangerous to get caught with the drugs than to use them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
For
living
sure.
in that country, you're definitely going to die then. And I was gonna say to you when you were talking about like some of the other countries that are like landlocked, that may have a better hold on
Yeah, I mean,
um,
obviously, like
their
Iran, Saudi
drugs.
Arabia, China, they're all bordering other fairly large
Yeah.
countries. I mean, China obviously borders Mongolia to the south, but Mongolia is quite literally the least populated, population dense country in the world. And they border, North and South Korea, but, they own North Korea in a very real sense. So, I mean, it just doesn't seem like China's a great example to set. You could potentially talk about countries in the Middle East, but feel free to go where
Yeah,
you're
well,
going with that.
you can't use China because China like to have their numbers. Like I mean, for like a year, they had zero COVID cases. So I mean, like
Yeah,
we don't know what the numbers
not completely
um,
trustworthy in general.
exactly. Um, yeah, man, but yeah, so if we can't control that border, you know, and it's like this, you know, like let's say if you had the faucet, you had the tub running, right, and now it's overflowing and getting on the floor and going into the living room, etc. Right, the first thing you do is you turn off the faucet. Like you don't just grab the towel and start trying to um, dry up the floor and grab the comforter and the pillows and, trying to soak up the water. You need to turn off the faucet. You need to turn off the source. And we can't do that because that's literally where but things about 95% of them are coming from. And until we can learn how to turn off the faucet, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to um, somebody commented in another chat. threw me off. But
I don't see it on the screen. Am I missing it somewhere?
uh, it's no, you wouldn't see it. It's army buddy of mine.
Okay, gotcha.
But man, I forgot what I was about to say.
You were talking about how you can't cut drugs off at the source. I mean, essentially, our connections and our geographic ties to Mexico specifically, but also other Latin and Central American countries, such as Panama, Puerto Rico. Like, we couldn't turn off the faucet. We don't have an effective way of currently turning off the faucet, which is what you would need to do.
Yeah.
In order to stop the drugs. I mean, like, you don't stop drugs by, like, trying to get everybody in the United States that are on drugs to quit. What you do is you cut off their source, which means that they don't have the option to do it to begin with. We as United States, just really don't have a good way of doing it. And I'd be willing to bet, even if we had really strict laws specifically for the Mexican border, there would be clever, really intelligent, and/or simple ways to go about that. And by that, I mean there's boats. By that, I mean there's like U.S. citizens just being drug mules. By that, I mean there's underground caves and caverns. There's flights. Seriously, there's just so many ways because of the geography of the United States to get drugs in that is really, really hard to cut the source off entirely.
Yeah. We're talking about, I think it was the second topic you had, race. Unless it was something else that you wanted to say about geography.
No, I mean, I think there's a bunch of geographic challenges for the United States. I think other countries
Definitely.
also can have geographic challenges, and I mean, if somebody really wants to get into it, we can. But I think we've covered that pretty well. I think the ultimate end goal is trying to figure out, like, how do we turn off the faucet, and that's something that maybe we can just leave in people's minds as a thought experiment, because it's not something that I don't think either of us, or maybe even anyone in chat, or obviously anyone in the United States that has any power over the situation has come up with a effective solution for, or at least not one that's readily implemented.
Yeah. Another thing that I wanted to talk about, right before the show, I had mentioned race, and I thought that was an important topic because the drug war itself isn't racist, but it doesn't affect everyone equally, and so you'll have it'll affect, and it has affected minorities much higher than, much more than like your white communities. Why? Because it's the drug war is primarily fought inside the urban communities, right? It's fought in the inner city. So that being said, it is I guess I want to say it is inadvertently racist, right? Because you have like a lot of young black kids, a lot of young Hispanics, out on the street, and they're becoming victims of some of the violence that exists due to the fact that there's this war that's on drugs that's fought, in their communities. It's not been fought in the suburbs.
Yeah, I mean, so just to kind of give you a good quote involving the concept of racism and the war on drugs, the ACLU said that, quote, the drug war is the new Jim Crow, because it's disproportionately affecting minorities, unfortunately, and even in mild cases where you have specifically African Americans in possession of a small amount of something like marijuana, they tend to get harsher judgment, harsher treatment, harsher penalties, and more prison time than a white person of the same offense. So it's basically, I mean, like the unfortunate statistic is that as of 2019, more than 700,000 black people were in prison in the United States for possession of drugs or narcotics. And that equaled the number of known slaves in the year 1820.
Jeez. You know that raises another point because I was talking to a friend over the weekend, and I had we were arguing about something very similar to this, and I had in my research I had found that $51 billion annually is spent on fighting the drug war. Right, that's the 51 billion is just the tax money that's taken from citizens. However, when you're talking about people being locked up and losing their livelihood, over this drug war, I mean that's an added cost. That you have people that could have been very productive members of society, and we'll never get to see them just because of that.
Yeah, so a couple real quick comments since we're here in edit. From
Yeah.
YouTube, we have HT3 that says, politicians have had their hand in the money bag, hashtag corruption. Politics play a role on discussions being made. You're not wrong. I mean, there's, I don't want to get too deep down the rabbit hole of government conspiracy and government corruption, but it's been posited, and I'm not going to lend any credence to the reality of it, but it's been posited that about
Good. You got that picture of Reagan up there.
I have the picture of
noticed
Reagan
that.
up there
Yeah.
for Nancy Reagan, not for anything else.
Oh, okay. Oh, gotcha,
Yeah,
gotcha.
obviously, Nancy Reagan, Just Say No to Drugs, the big famous
Oh, okay.
campaign that happened in the 1980s. That's all. That's the only reason Reagan's up there.
Oh.
But to get
Unless
a
you were
little bit
alluding
into
to
it,
something,
I
yeah.
mean, we could get into the CIA and FBI and the distribution of drugs that are taken as possession from the police. Because there have been cases and cases and cases, and they are readily available, of police departments, federal departments such as the CIA and FBI, that have acquired drugs through raids, through drug raids, through repossession, through repossession of households, that then take and distribute those drugs back to the people. There's been cases and cases and cases of it. I just read a case yesterday in which a cop finally, after 7 years, was arrested after repeatedly, and having done over 45 arrests for drug paraphernalia, planted drugs on individuals who had no history of drug usage. So it took 7 years for this guy to get caught, and it was, I mean, for 2 of those years he was using a body cam, and they used that to prosecute him to the full extent of the law. He lost his job. Hopefully he goes to prison. But not to get too far down that rabbit hole, Gunslinger said it gets back to the money. Yeah, I think everyone is on the same page. I don't think Gio or I would disagree. There's a lot of money in drugs. And I think the government kind of missed out on an opportunity and not just legalizing marijuana, because if you did, you could tax it. They tax everything else. The thing is, you can't tax things that are prohibited. So, like, you couldn't tax alcohol, which is why you now have, I don't know what they're called everywhere else, but up here they're called liquor and spirit shops, which are owned and run by state facilities. I know down south where I lived before, they were called ABC stores, which is alcoholic beverage control. Also state owned and run. You had to have liquor licenses provided for you by your state in order to sell alcohol, and that was at restaurants or whether you were running a liquor store. And so the government is getting their bang for their buck on alcohol, and they're starting to dip their hands in the pockets of marijuana by legalizing it. And it's legal in I think 29 or 30 states right now. But I just can't believe it took them that long to realize that it was a moneymaker. Like,
Right.
I mean,
it also makes it safe.
Yeah, it does.
Like because like right now, you go. Let's say if like someone wants to go buy some cocaine, you're not sure what you're getting. There was this guy in Central Virginia, and he was cutting coke with in your sometimes the ceiling, some houses the ceiling has that paint prep or
Popcorn
whatever,
texture.
and you can scratch it and it comes off.
Yeah, the popcorn texture.
Yeah, he was cutting coke with that. And so, I mean, I don't know what that stuff is made of, but I mean, how dangerous is
Typically, it's
that?
made out
So,
of
like,
foam, so it's really not good for you to put in your body.
exactly. I
I
mean,
mean,
and
not
Coke
not
isn't good
necessarily
for
that
your
Coke
body
is,
either. But
you
I mean,
know.
but still, like, it's not a. I mean, the fact that there's a lot of cases where people might use Coke for once, and because it's cut with something that is very deadly to our bodies, it might end up dying. You know, like immediately. You know, so the if this was being regulated by the state, then you could cut this down. You know, it actually make it safer for people.
Yep.
I'm going to get to a comment.
Yep. Go ahead.
Swartz, he said Chinese fentanyl is dropping people like flies too. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I don't think the purpose of this, and just to be clear, at least where I stand, I don't think the purpose of this is to promote drug use. I just think that our current war
Yeah, I don't
on
think that's what
drug.
he was saying.
No, and I
But
don't think it was either. I don't want you to
I
take
skipped
that.
somebody's comment too.
It looks like it was Miguel Laura. It was a repeat of the comment by HT3. So it looks like we just have some agreement there. I don't think anyone's disagreeing. That just some people, they want money. And unfortunately, drugs are a really good way to do it. And it doesn't matter who the bystanders are, whether it's unfortunate young African American people that just get thrown in prison, and then now the prison's making money off of them. And then, of course, the taxpayer dollars, which are coming out of everyone else's pockets. But it also ruins that person's future.
Yeah.
So, there's just so much going on with, I mean, simple things like minor drug offenses, like possession of an ounce of marijuana has led to, like, people's incarceration, being on their permanent record, being either a misdemeanor or felony offense, depending on if they got charged with intent to distribute, them losing their job, losing their family because they're in prison. The prison's making out like bandits because they're getting paid from the federal government. I mean, like, there's just so much money exchanging hands, and in the meantime, it's just ruining people's lives. And I don't mean just the person that did drugs. I mean their families, their friends, etc. Like, all these people are affected, and it's something that a lot of people don't take into consideration when stuff like this happens.
And you know, I don't want to get like off topic here, but this drug war, it bleeds into other areas. You know, so like think about when like some of the instances when there's like instances of police abuse when a cop shoots someone that probably shouldn't have been shot, or they beat up someone. You know, they're handling someone too rough. The vast majority of times when they're out there doing this active policing, it's like they're trying to fight the drug war. They're looking for stuff like that, and somebody doesn't have it, and so and then you're increasing the amount of interactions between the government and the public. When I say government, I'm talking about police officers, right? And so you this drug war bleeds into other areas because it creates opportunities for abuse. Um, we had another comment. Doctors prescribe ridiculously strong drugs, so why not regulate all the drugs and decriminalize it? Marijuana will be legal soon. How long until everything else becomes legal? Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you
Yeah, Miguel. I mean, that's the reason
on
we have
that.
opioids up on the screen. That's something
Yeah,
that a lot of people kind of go by. It goes missing. It goes under the radar and over people's heads, or both. But the reason opioids is up on the screen right now is because they are some of the most addictive drugs on the planet, and they are overprescribed. That is not
and
an opinion. That is a fact. If you look at the
yeah,
stats across the board, no matter where you get them from, opioids are overprescribed because they're highly addictive pain medications like morphine and what's the other really big one? Oxycontin. And they're extremely addictive. And they're not all that well regulated, to be honest, which is why I have them up on the screen. Because it's ironic that people are dying of opioid possession and abuse, and they're being prescribed it by medical doctors because there's just little to no regulation where there should be. Whereas you have things like marijuana that's still being treated as an illegal, abusive, hardcore substance that kills 0 people per year on average. I'm not saying no one has ever died from marijuana. I'm just saying the average. Yeah, the average across the past 10 years or so has been 0 people per year. Versus opioids kill hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of people a year.
So at the end, he has one more question. It's like, how long until everything else becomes legal? And I am not as optimistic about all the other drugs. Like, usually, I spend a lot of time arguing online about libertarian stuff. And what do you say?
I was going to say, neither am I, and I'll let you finish, I swear. I was going to say, because all I was going to comment was, look at how long it's taken marijuana, like, considered one of the most lenient of all drugs that has the least effectiveness of, like, and least danger of any current unregulated drug in the United States for at least all 50 states. But look how long it's taken. So I'm just not that optimistic, but go ahead.
Even with the government, I mean, I think the government's unlikely to do it, but I think the vast majority of the public is opposed to it as well. Like, usually when I talk to people about this stuff, they're all for legalizing marijuana. And then when I extended to hard drugs, they're like, whoa, well, you crazy. You legalize cocaine, legalize meth? I'm like, yeah. Like, why not? So...
Yeah, I mean, like, the fortunate upside of legalizing drugs is regulation. Yes, and that's what we're doing, and that's what we're getting done with things like marijuana, and that's what we did with things like alcohol.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of distrust among Americans for other Americans, because it's just somehow there's this belief that, if tomorrow, if drugs are illegal, if we legalize crack, then your neighbor's going to start doing crack, and that's one thing. You don't want government to over govern, right? You don't need to outlaw something that the vast majority of people believe is just plain stupid.
Yeah, I mean that's why it's like, oh, like if murder was made legal, like, are you going to go out and murder someone? Like, chances are no, because you're probably not a murderer or a psychopath. Like, it's just not in your nature to do these things.
Yeah. And so, a lot of people, they would think that, drugs would just skyrocket. Like, alcohol's legal. Not everybody's just drunk. No. So,
yeah,
I'm not as optimistic.
Yeah, let's go ahead and read these couple comments off by Miguel real quick, and then we can take on something else or continue on if necessary.
Yeah.
It says, medical school's trained to medicate first. Think about the times you've gone to the doctors for something minor and immediately prescribed something. And then regarding the danger, government complains of THC levels and possibility of combining Mary Jane or marijuana with fentanyl. Yeah, so I mean, like, I could tell you for sure, especially when it comes to, like, medication. I have quite a few friends that are nurses who went to nursing school. I have a very, very few, like 1 or 2 friends that I could call up right now that are doctors, medical doctors. And a lot of times, especially if they're like a primary care physician, unless it's something insanely off the wall or specialized, most of the time it's either placebo or, like, go buy some ibuprofen or aspirin and deal with it. Suck it up. Now, you talk to those people that work in the medical field, the reason for that being is because if it's not a huge or immediate threat to that person, then they're trying to get their resources and time to other people that may have other issues. That's not necessarily always the case, and I'm sure there's some negligence going on there as well, but at least with regulation and legalization, it cuts down dramatically on the abuse side of things.
There's another objection that I hear a lot, that if you were to legalize drugs, then people would start using it in operating dangerous machinery, like, such as, a vehicle, a car, or a airplane, etc. Like pretty much, the drug equivalent of drinking and driving, right? It's a DUI,
Yep.
and I don't think it would do that.
I mean, I could tell you for sure it's not going to happen because, I mean, we already have a way more dangerous substance to be behind the wheel of something dangerous, and that's alcohol.
Alcohol, that's very easy to get.
And I just the people that are going to do it are going to do it whether it's illegal or not. The people that are not going to do it are doing it because they actually have common decency and consideration for other people that may be affected by their decision. And I think that's something where at least Gio and I would agree that even when we talk about things like the possibility of legalizing something like cocaine, if you're doing it in your own household and you're not impacting other people, do all the cocaine you want. I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm just saying as long as it's not impacting other people, it shouldn't matter to us. But the minute you get behind a wheel and you're drunk and you drive and you're potentially putting other people in harm's way because of your decisions, that's a problem. But things like alcohol now are already very legal and already easily obtained. I mean, you don't even have to be of legal age to buy it. And it's way worse to get behind the wheel when you're, almost blackout drunk than it would be when you've hit a one-hitter on your way to work. I'm just saying.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, that reasoning, like, the reasoning for that is far more intrusive than it has to be. Right? You don't have to outlaw something just because somebody may do it and drive. Right? Just outlaw doing it and driving, right? So you don't need to outlaw alcohol to prosecute people for DUIs, right? You can just make it illegal to drink and drive.
Yeah, you're driving under the influence of a substance. It's already illegal.
Yeah, and that's what I was arguing with someone online on one of these libertarian pages. And I was saying, like, that same argument could be used to outlaw cell phones or GPSs, or maybe just not getting enough sleep. I mean, or having children, right? Like, when I drive my daughter around, she's doing stuff to distract me all the time.
Yeah, distracted driving is considered as bad as driving while intoxicated.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, they are showing, like, as far as reaction times to people that are texting while driving have a slower or as slow reaction time as people that have just blown over the limit of alcohol.
Yeah. I was driving down the street a few days ago, and she threw this this toy laptop, knocked me in the head with it. It really hurt. That's a possibility. There's no reason to outlaw these things just because.
Yeah, you can't outlaw
somebody could do
driving
it
with kids in your car. Like, it's just obviously, like, and you can't necessarily outlaw distracted driving because anything could happen. A bug could fly in the windshield or window and hit you in the face. I mean, it's a distraction. The thing is, when you're intentionally distracted by things like alcohol, marijuana, or other abusive substances like cocaine or heroin, whatever, I mean, you could potentially put other people in harm's way. When it's something like a kid throwing a toy or bug flying in the window, it's obviously not something that happens so regularly or happens to the point where you could control these things. So there's a clear dichotomy between the two of them. It is something that should be an easily distinguishable thing.
Yeah, the idea, to change gears a little bit, just the idea of fighting drugs, like, because there's you know what it reminds me of? The war on terror that we have now, like, which for instance, the war on terror, there's no obvious enemy, right? It's a concept, it's an idea, and now with the war on drugs, it's a war on a commodity.
Yeah,
that makes it open ended.
Yeah,
it's very hard to defeat that kind of enemy, or even tell when it's defeated.
Yeah, I'm reminded, and not to get too philosophical or sound too nerdy, but I am a nerd. If you haven't read Sun Tzu's The Art of War, one of the philosophies about going to war, and Sun Tzu, meant war with other people, like what we consider like ground warfare or whatnot. But he made a really good point, and I think it should apply to all wars, including things like war on terror, war on drugs, is that if you do not have a clear end as a possibility, you should not go into the war. And what he meant by that, as far as like actual war and what it applies to on like things like war on terror, war on drugs, is what does the end of the war on drugs look like? What does the end of the war on terror look like? Because you're not going to eradicate drugs in general. You're not going to eradicate drug users. You're not going to eradicate terrorism. You're not going to eradicate like terrorist acts. So what is the end game? If you can give me a clear path, if anyone could lay out a clear path to the end game of things like the war on drugs, then you potentially have an okay war strategy starting. That's not the only consideration that you need to have. But in general, when you look at like the purpose, which is up on the screen, of the war on drugs, it's to stop drug use, or to lessen drug use, or to lessen people that are addicted to drugs. And yet when you look at its effectiveness, in 2010, NBC wrote an article entitled "The War on Drugs Has Had Zero Results." And they said that because the people who use drugs have gone up. The cost of drugs have gone up. The people that have been impacted by the use of drugs have gone up. The people that have fought in the war on drugs have gone up. The people that have died from the war on drugs have gone up. The prison population for drug use has gone up. The amount of money that is made from the illegal drug population, or the illegal drug distribution, has gone up. So what has the war on drugs done? I genuinely couldn't tell you any positive that has come about from the war on drugs in general, because the number of users, the number of people addicted, the number of people in prison, the amount of money it costs, the amount of tax dollars we spend on it, all of those things have gone up.
Yeah, I'm looking at some charts right now from the National Institute of Research, and they have in 1999 there were 40,000 on drug overdose, right? And then you see each year preceding, the number just goes up, right? And by 2020, remember, you started out with 20,000 in 1999 when they started recording these numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And by 2020, you have 92,000.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's not a failure, I don't know what is.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds terrible, but the drug, and so it's going to kind of address what Miguel says. It says when it stops producing the amount of money it does now, that's the end. The problem with that statement is that the illegal drug industry, as of last year, at the end of the last fiscal year, made about $320 billion, which was about 1% of the total economy on the earth.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that. It's about 1% of the GDP of the world GDP.
Well, the whole world.
That is insane.
Yeah, 1% of the whole world came from the whole world's economy came from illegal drug use or illegal drug distribution. 1% of the whole world. So it's not like it's losing money. And by the way, no one's losing money here. The people that are distributing drugs are getting paid more because it's considered more dangerous to do so. The people that are running prisons are making more money because they're housing more people that are on drugs. And the federal government, which is spending this money, is charging higher taxes to fight this war that has had no effect.
Yeah, so, I was going to say, the only people losing money is the taxpayers.
Yeah, the people that are losing money is just us. It's the people.
We're losing.
The people are losing. Everybody else seems to be making out like a bandit. Yep. Yeah. So, let's see. Other cost factor I just wanted to throw out there since I had the stat up and it was in front of me. Nearing $2 trillion since the new war on drugs. It looks like that we spend over $60 billion a year on just fighting the war on drugs. That doesn't include people that are incarcerated. That doesn't include the amount of money that people spend on lawyers fighting this stuff. That's just the amount of money that goes towards the actual war on drugs. And sadly, that's quite literally almost 10 times the amount we spend on the eradication of human trafficking. So I know drugs are bad, but I'm just saying human trafficking.
Human trafficking. Yeah, there's an actual victim.
Yeah, human trafficking's worse. That's just where it is, and we spend nearly 10 times the amount of money on it. So it makes me a little perturbed because it's my tax dollars that are going to spend it, and unfortunately, yeah. So, $320 billion made every year in the legal drug industry, which is about 1%. We spend more than twice the amount of money per year for things like criminal enterprises and counterfeiting, and even more so than the eradication of human trafficking. So, it's just it's sad. It's a sad thing. It's a genuinely sad thing.
That's ridiculous, man.
Yeah, so I mean, we covered prison, we covered death penalty. There's 33 countries that have the death penalty. We covered geography and race. We touched a little bit on opioids. Purpose. Let's go to purpose, and by that I mean like let's cover potential help and or solution to the problem of the war on drugs. And by that I mean, obviously, I don't think anyone here thinks that we should continue the war on drugs, but what is a better plan to or alternative to the war on drugs, and then we can wrap it up.
Personal responsibility is a better alternative to the war on drugs. I'd say instead of trying to force people to be drug free, live drug free lives, just legalize it. Let them choose. Legalize it, regulate it. That way we know that it's as safe as it could be. That way you're not at least putting like unknown substances in your body, and then let people be free to make the decisions that that they want. I mean, we're adults, and typically you look at the way the government spends money and some of the decisions it make, people as an individual tend to be far more responsible than government.
Yeah, definitely on the individual level. That's just true.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you hear the government who spends $1 trillion more than it actually makes in taxes. Running this $1 trillion deficit. Trying to make like financial decisions for us. Government is really bad at making decisions, making smart decisions. So let the people be free and make these decisions on their own. I think that's the best way.
Fair enough.
Because to me, for me, a greater deterrent from using drugs is just the harm that it's going to do to me.
Definitely.
Anytime I've been faced with any sort of drugs, that was always my main concern. I wasn't concerned about if I get caught when I go to prison. No, it's like I don't want this to harm my body.
Yeah, and I mean, like, also, like, even if things were legalized, and this is something I think we kind of brushed over, but something that's obviously, even if we legalize things, that doesn't stop, like, private organizations, employers, and whatnot from preventing you from doing drugs on the job. So all these people that were like, if you have that concern of like, like airline pilots and construction workers are going to go get high before they do their job. No, I mean, like, companies now, even in states that have legalized things like marijuana, still can do drug testing and still can prevent you from like coming in off your rocker and performing a job. So like that's not really a major concern. Like if you're going to work and you're cracked out on cocaine, your job's probably going to stop you from working there unless you have like an incredibly lax solo job that you're doing by yourself. If you're doing things like going into construction zones or trying to fly a plane and it's obvious that you're tweaking on drugs or that you're high as a kite, they're probably not going to allow that, at least not to their knowledge, and chances are you're going to get reported and or fired. So, it's not like if you legalized it tomorrow, everybody's just going to start doing hard drugs and whatever. It's more like, obviously, the people that want to continue their jobs that are going to have regulations and restrictions on what you can use at your job are going to be dealing with it.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to touch on before we go to the wrapping up page?
Nope. I've exhausted everything that I wanted to say.
All
That
right, so
topic.
chat is no longer up on screen. That doesn't necessarily mean that we won't see it. It just means that you guys won't. But this is our wrapping up page. This is where we want to take a minute to just thank you for watching and listening. Thank you for commenting, giving your feedback, giving comments, asking questions, allowing us to field those for you, and doing the best of our abilities, giving you some a little bit of information that we have, and just kind of letting your voice be heard. We genuinely do thank you for that. It means a lot to us. If you haven't already, please share our page to your friends and family and everybody else, either on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, whatever. We're trying to get a little more well known and grow. We love it when people are here commenting and asking questions. It makes it a much more enjoyable experience for us. Hopefully, it does for you as well. We like doing the show. We like doing different topics each week. We're open to topic suggestions and feedback. So seriously, thank you. Gio, is there anything else you wanted to say before we wrap up?
Um, yeah, we'll please tune in next week, same time, same channel, and we'll try to get the topic we choose a little earlier. Hopefully, maybe by Thursday or Friday or something like that.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have it out before the end of the week, the new topic, and we'll post it on the Facebook group. And if you have any questions or suggestions for a topic, we'd be glad to cover it. And look forward to seeing you guys then.